Good morning. Happy Sunday. I do hope you're well this morning. We are now going to look into it. It seems to me that David's life is split into two parts. Now, you'd think it would automatically be split into the part of his life while he was fleeing from Saul and the part of his life after he becomes king in actuality. But I think the demarcation line in his life is the murder of Uriah and the taking of Bathsheba, because after that there seems to be one thing after another that happens in David's life and in the life of his family, and I think that much of it was a consequence of that awful thing that he did, which we know is now forgiven, and he is back established as king again, and is back in favour with the Lord. Of course, this kind of up and downness, we don't experience that when we're under New Testament grace, because God loves us and his grace is extended towards us, and there is not punishment. But what deliberate sin does for us is it opens us up to enemy attack, makes us more vulnerable, more of a target, and it gives Satan an opportunity. And in David's family, this is demonstrated. I mean, we've often said, haven't we, or I've often said to you, that the Old Testament stories are there for a warning. Now, we've all read really romantic stories, and there's a lot of stories that are written, a lot of novels that have been written which romanticize the intense love and passion, or perhaps we could call it lust and passion, of young people for inappropriate people. And there are many books that have been written, many films that have been filmed about love, which is so overwhelming that it causes people to do outrageous things. And then as soon as that love is satisfied, it turns to the opposite, extreme disgust and hatred. And it is said that these extremes of emotion are very close. And I think it is true. I think in the spiritual, it is true that if someone is intensely active against Christianity and hates everything about Jesus, that is very close to being totally devoted to Jesus. We see it in Saul, who became Paul, the great leader of the New Testament, intensely, passionately, totally committed to destroying the church. And then when he meets Jesus, he turns completely. The two emotions are so very close. But here we are in 2 Samuel 13, and we have an incident that happens between 3 of David's children. Now, most of David's children were not born to the same mother, so they are half brothers and sisters. But we have Absalom, who was David's 3rd son, whose full sister was Tamar. And we have Amnon, who was David's 1st son, who was half-brother to both Absalom and Tamar. If you want to look at the lineage, it's in 2 Samuel 3, verse 2, I think it is, 2 and 3. You see there the list of the children that were born, well, the sons, not the girls, they're not listed, but the sons that were born to David in Hebron. And I cannot think that David's action of extramarital sex with Bathsheba went unnoticed by these boys who had grown up observing what their father did and learning from him. That's what we do. We learn from our parents how life should go on and what is okay and what is not okay. And I'm sure they knew what had happened. Anyway, it doesn't actually say that. That's an assumption of mine, but I don't think it would have gone unnoticed and been unknown to them. And the birth of the baby in the household and the death of that baby would have been well known to them. Anyway, but they didn't take any notice of the judgment. I'm musing now, but here we are. Absalom was a very attractive man. We know that from further descriptions of him later on. He was a beautiful man. He was very, very comely, and his sister was like him, a beautiful girl. And their half-brother, Amnon, fell in love with her, just loved her passionately and desired her and wanted her. And he knew he would not be given her because she was his half-sister. And he schemes, just as David schemed over Uriah. He schemes for a way to take her, and he pretends he's ill on the advice of his friend, his friend, who is a very crafty man, Jonadab, an ideas man. He noticed how down in the mouth Amnon was, and he said, why? You're the king's son. Why are you? What's up? What's so bad? And he said, I love my brother's sister. I love her, my half-sister. And he says, right, pretend to be ill, and only Tamar's ministrations will ease your illness. And then take her. And he does that. And David sends Tamar to him, not suspecting anything. And when she gives him the cakes that she's prepared, the food she's prepared, he rapes her. It's very sad. It's very sad. He rapes her and ruins her. She had no prospect of marriage, having been raped by her brother. A woman's place in those days was very different to what we have now. And being a virgin for a woman was incredibly important on marriage. And it says in verse 15, then Amnon hated her with a very great hatred, so that the hatred with which he hated her was greater than the love with which he had loved her. As soon as he had his way with her, he didn't want her. And she pleads with him to let her live in his house, to right the wrong he'd done by taking her as his wife, whatever the consequences would be, but he would not. And then we have, she tears her robes. She was wearing a robe which indicated that she was a virgin daughter of the king, and she tore that robe, and she went crying back to her brother Absalom. And Absalom says to her in verse 20, has Amnon your brother been with you? Now hold your peace, my sister. He is your brother. Do not take this to heart. So Tamar dwelt, a desolate woman, in her brother Absalom's house. When King David heard of all these things, he was very angry. But Absalom spoke to Amnon neither good nor bad, for Absalom hated Amnon because he'd forced his sister Tamar. I must stop there. But it goes on to say that for 2 full years, after 2 full years, David was very angry about this situation, but he didn't do anything about it. And that was where his fault lay. He did not deal with this situation as he should have done. He was angry, but he let Tamar live with Absalom, and he let Amnon go unpunished. My thought for the day, my time is up. Have thinkings and read the rest of that chapter, and we'll meet again tomorrow. God bless you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.